Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Smoller. I am the Director of Educational Programs here at the Journey Through Hallowed Ground, and today we are continuing our tour through Journey sites, and we are joined today by Tracy Evans from Monocacy National Battlefield. So Tracy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, welcome to share your screen, and we're excited to learn more about the site.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining in on the webinar. I'm going to try to share my screen here, and here we go. So I want to tell you a little bit about Monocacy, the Battle of Monocacy, and some of the layers of history that we have here that we encourage visitors to explore. So I'm going to try to go through a little slideshow presentation here to give you some of the background and history of the battlefield. It's a beautiful picture that we have of our 14th New Jersey monument, which unfortunately right now is closed to the public, but should be opening up in the next couple months with a new improved access to the battlefield for our visitors. Actually, the state highway had closed some of that area as they were working on a bridge project, which now includes a pedestrian walkway that can get people across the railroad tracks and into other parts of the battlefield. So that would be a big improvement for our visitor access to the battlefield. All right. All right. So pre-Civil War, as most areas, we have a lot of history here at the battlefield. All the way from Native Americans along the river. Most of the road systems that we have are originally trails that the Native Americans were using in the area. And then as we fast forward to settlement of the area, and even once we become a nation and into the 1780s and 90s, we start seeing this area being populated with the farms, and it is, fast forward to the Civil War, a border state, which means that there were slaves even during the Civil War, and this was an area where there were also enslaved individuals. And this picture is of the Best Farm. What's unique about this farm, the buildings that you see in the background, they're actually built by a French family who had escaped both the slave rebellions in Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti, and also part of the family fled the French Revolution from France. And they actually came here to Frederick County, and they sort of tried to recreate this plantation system that they were familiar with. And they would, in the 1800 census, and again in the 1810 census, have registered about 90 enslaved people working on this farm. And so there was a large archaeological investigation that was done in the early 2000s. And at the end of it is when they found some primary source material that kind of helped them determine where the enslaved people on the property may have lived. It's a very large population of people, but they hadn't yet found evidence of it. Well, ironically, the field that is now farmed, there was a primary source from a Polish expatriate traveler who was in the area, and he talks about seeing the slave dwellings. And so they went back and they did some further excavation in this particular area, and they actually did uncover where these people were living. And there were 6 individual houses that would have been about the size of the building that you see in the very foreground of this picture. So we have a little bit of an idea of what it would have looked like. And this is sort of an artist rendering of sorts of what we think that it might have looked like. So this is that house that I had suggested, and we call that the secondary structure. We don't know for certain that an overseer lived there, but it would make sense. These houses, it's kind of hard from this perspective, but they're actually equidistant to this house. So there's 6 of them. There was also an area where they had a common kitchen area. They each would have had a garden area where they would have raised food. The more food that they were able to get themselves, the better they would be able to eat, less money that their enslaver has to provide for them. But all of the houses that are the structures that you see here, the barn in the back, which is basically an English threshing barn, the house that you see here, this is what it originally would have looked like, and this is that secondary structure. All of those structures are still there on the farm. And it's just a very interesting place to kind of get the perspective of how this might have been. Because if you're standing here, house, or even at this house, you have a clear view of everything that's going on here. And if you think about where they're coming from, an island where that's in the midst of a slave rebellion, there's a real sense of physical control up here. So just being able to be on site in that particular area on the battlefield is very interesting to the interpretation on what it must have been like for people who were living here. The people who are here are going to be here until about 1828, when the railroad starts coming through around 1830, and then they're going to move off the property, and it's going to go through a couple different hands until the family that's there during the Civil War will live there. There are several other large farms that are going to be in the area at the same time that the Vincentier family who owns this property are there. On the other side of the river, which is now we call the Thomas Farm, there was a man by the name of Marshall who lived there. There was a ferry system for people who crossed the river because there was no bridge at that time, and there was a tavern site. So there's a whole layer of sort of colonial, and then as we're a very young country, that history as well. All right, so another layer before we get to the Battle of Monocacy, we've got all these farms here. We are literally and figuratively a crossroads of war, because we have the Georgetown Pike, which is the main route from Frederick to Washington. You have the B&O Railroad that has a junction area, and then two branches of that railroad that can move supplies and troops. And so it is strategically a very important area during the war. And as such, there are both Union and Confederate armies that are coming through here just about every year of the Civil War. So it's a huge impact on the people who live here, in particular, the Best family. We just talked about a little of the history of that farm back when it was owned by a French family. But now it is farmed by a family by the name of Best. They are tenants there. The Trail family actually owns the farm at that time. But the Georgetown Pike goes straight through their farm. So they own the farmland on both sides of the Georgetown Pike. And as the armies come through and are camping in these areas, they are spread out all over their farm. Particularly in 1862, coming off of Second Manassas, you have the Confederates coming into the area, and they're going to occupy Frederick for 3 days. And while they're doing that, they are living on the Best farm. And at that time is when Lee would write Special Orders 191. That's going to basically split his army into 5 different sections as they're moving towards Harper's Ferry and Hagerstown area. So this is where those orders are sent. One of the orders is lost, and it is a few days later picked up by Union soldiers as they're coming through the area. It goes up through the ranks very quickly until McClellan sort of has his hands on it, and then knows which direction the Confederates have gone. At that point, they really were unsure. And so combination of Harper's Ferry not falling as quickly as Lee had intended, and McClellan sort of getting information about where the Confederates were headed to, gets him to move his army quicker, ends up in battles of South Mountain and Antietam. So a lot of people are very familiar with this famous lost order. And this is the state sign that shows where Lee's headquarters was during that 1862 campaign. It was on the Best farm. It was in about an acre, a wooded lot where they farmed timber there. And this is where his camp was, and where his adjutant Chilton would have written the letter, or the order. And this is our sort of mock-up map, because we get lots of questions about special ops orders. We had a huge event during the sesquicentennial where we actually had the original orders on display. So we've done a great deal of research on it. Everybody wants to know where it was found. This is the Georgetown Pike. And this is that acre wooded lot there at the Best Farm. And we've sort of put this great big circle here because we don't know for certain exactly where it was picked up, but this is kind of where those armies come together, or that, you know, where the Confederates were. And then this line follows the 28th Indiana in the 12th Corps there, where they were several individuals from the 28th Indiana, or I'm sorry, the 27th Indiana, who picked up the orders. And this is the route that they were taking. And that's actually a quarry now. And there's a road there that comes, and that's Grove Road right there. So if anybody's familiar with the area, that kind of indicates to us sort of where both Union and Confederate forces would have both been at that time with that order. So anybody who's interested in Special Orders 191, which we have tons of people who are, if you know what I'm talking about, this will make sense. If you've not heard of Special Orders 191, well, you can get on our website and read a little bit more about it, and that will help you. All right, so the next layer of history is fast forwarding about 2 years to the Battle of Monocacy. At this point in the war, most of the fighting is going on in Northern Virginia. The troops that had been protecting the capital are taken out of the forts to reinforce Grant, who is actually has his headquarters at City Point in Virginia. And he's, there's a series of battles that are going on there. In the meantime, forces had been sent into the Shenandoah Valley to push Union General Hunter out of the valley because he's causing a lot of destruction. And the Confederates want to keep communication open in the valley. They also want to make sure that they can continue to get natural resources out of this. This is called the breadbasket of the Confederacy. This is where they're getting a lot of their food and supplies from. And so it's very important that Confederates keep this corridor open. Union General Hunter had been doing lots of destruction, trying to keep this open, or trying to shut it down for the Confederates and open it up for the Union. So the Confederates weren't being very productive, making their way and trying to keep this corridor open. And so Jubal Early is sent by General Lee with a large force of about 30,000 to go in here, reinforce the Confederates, and try to open up the valley. And he is successful in doing so. And basically there's an agreement between Early and Lee, even before he begins his campaign, that once he gets into the valley, if he believes that he can continue and try to get to Washington, he can do so. And he makes that decision once he's in the valley, and the operation looks like it's going to be successful. And he makes the decision to continue to go down the valley and into Maryland and to threaten the capital. Several goals involved in this. One is, if nothing else, to force Grant to move soldiers from from his headquarters City Point area that he had brought to reinforce, to put them back into the forts in Washington. And that would then relieve pressure on the Confederate forces in Virginia, forcing Grant to move those soldiers out of the area. It's also an election year, which is very important. And if they can show, sorry, I'm actually in the visitor center, so our phone is ringing. We're actually closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so it will go to voicemail. But the other part is to threaten it, and it is an election year. And so if it looks like the Confederates have a big enough force and strong enough force to get into the Capitol, they're hoping that that will kind of sway public opinion. And McClellan is also running, for president. And so they're hoping that maybe they can go on a peace program here. And anyhow, so it would be extremely beneficial, obviously, for Confederates to be able to get into the Capitol in 1864. They know they're not going to hold it for very long, but just the fact that they could get in and do it is going to be a big show of strength to everyone. All right, and so what's going to end up happening is they are going to force Grant to move these soldiers to reinforce the area, because, and actually I had his picture on here. Lew Wallace is in command of the Middle Department, and basically he's in Baltimore. His westernmost boundary is the Monocacy. But the president of the railroad is the one who's going to really get the alert of what's happening. He hears that a large contingent of Confederate forces is coming into the area, and his men on the field are telling him telegraph lines are being torn up, railroad lines are being torn up as they make their way into Harper's Ferry and then towards Frederick. And so he is the one who's going to get Lew Wallace alerted to what's happening. And Lew Wallace is then going to send word to Union Command and let them know what is happening. Once Jubal Early and his forces get to Harper's Ferry, they have a better understanding of what's happening and that it is actually Jubal Early when he gets here to Frederick. And so Wallace is able to get that information to Grant and say, listen, you've got to get forces up here to stop this situation. And so General Ricketts is going to be sent with about 3,000 troops, the 6th Corps, and they're going to come up to, you can see that they are coming here from City Point. They're put on a steamer, sent up here to Locust Point in Baltimore, and from there, they're going to be put on the B&O Railroad, which they're supposed to go to Harper's Ferry, but fortunately for Lew Wallace, they have to go through the junction here at Monocacy to get to Harper's Ferry. And he's able to stop the train and say, Early is past Harper's Ferry, he is almost in Frederick, so we need the help here. And so he's able to get those men to reinforce his troops. He had brought about 2,500 men with him, and they're like 100-day men. And so they've been trained, but they've not really been in battle before. And so these reinforcements are going to be crucial to Wallace. So this is a picture of that junction area. This is post-war. Everything was burned during the war, so we don't really, and we don't have any images of it prior to that. But what you can see here from this bridge, these tracks that come up, that is this bridge that goes over the river. And that's that junction area where the trains have to come through on their way towards Harper's Ferry. This is very important during the Civil War. In '62, when the Confederates came through, they tried to blow up this bridge. They were able to do a little bit of damage for several days. They stopped transport on that bridge until Union forces would help B&O Railroad workers to get it up and running again. So this is always going to be a target, and it is definitely going to be a target again on July 9th, as Confederate soldiers are trying to get through the area. This is the other bridge that's not too far from that railroad bridge. There's a sketch here that was done by 14th New Jersey troops who were actually stationed here for about 9 months out of the war before they were ordered to join with the 3rd Division of the 6th Corps after the Battle of Gettysburg, and then ironically end up back here, which is very interesting because we have letters and information about a lot of these guys in the 14th New Jersey. They had connections to the area because they had lived here for so long. So they talk about the people who were here and how they interacted with them even during and before and after the battle. So this is what the bridge looks like today, the modern bridge. And this is going to be the bridge that the Confederates are going to first try to get across. They've got to get across this river in order to get to Washington. So this is sort of their first target. And this is the Georgetown Pike. The picture here, the Georgetown Pike will come here. You see here's the junction area. And then you've got the railroad bridge here and the covered wooden bridge here. This is sort of what the 355 now, which was Georgetown Pike at the time. That's sort of what it looks like today. But you can see there's a lot of open field here, and the Confederates are going to be coming out of Frederick. They will skirmish for about 2 days in Frederick while all the forces are coming up over the Catoctin Mountains. And then they're going to come down Georgetown Pike, and they're going to set up in these fields, and they're really trying to get across the river here at this point. And basically Wallace has set up his defense all along this side of the river, on the south side of the river. And he's going to put his 100-day men kind of from the Junction Bridge and then all the way up about 3 miles north of here where the Jug Bridge is on the Baltimore Pike, because he knows he's going to have to retreat at the end of the day. Wallace total is going to have maybe about 6,000 troops here. He's got those 3,000 reinforcements. He's got about 2,500 of his own. He had 8th Illinois Cavalry show up. So he's got a few extra people, but he knows at the end of the day, he's facing approximately 15,000 Confederate troops, and they are outgunned as well. The Confederates will have at their disposal upwards of 30 pieces of artillery. I think they actually use about 24. And the Union has Alexander's Baltimore Battery, which is 6 pieces of artillery. So they're completely outgunned. There are 2 pieces of artillery that were in blockhouses here to protect the junction area. There was a mountain howitzer, but there was no ammunition with it. And there was a 24-pounder howitzer. But early in that, they were able to use that pretty well in the morning. However, at some point, it was loaded backwards. And so they could not get the artillery out of the gun, and they weren't able to use it for the rest of the day. Alexander's Baltimore Battery does sort of revel in the fact that as they were retreating, they took that artillery with them as well, so the Confederates couldn't capture it. So this shows you just what I had mentioned, where the Confederates are sort of making their way down. You've got Union forces on the south side of the river. You've got about 300 men from those forces, mostly 100-day men, 1 company of 10th Vermont, who have established themselves on the opposite side of the river. And then as the Confederates continue to come down, you've got artillery sort of set up in different places. You've got the infantry coming down and trying to make their way there. A couple different attacks that are going to happen there. And then eventually, Wallace is going to make the decision to burn this bridge because he sees more Confederates coming out from Frederick down the Georgetown Pike, and he knows he's not going to be able to hold the bridge any longer. So he decides to burn it. Those 9th New York Heavy Artillery that had been sent over here on the other side of the river, they withdraw. They actually are told to burn the bridge, but it leaves some of these guys over here. And you'll see at this time, you've got a Union line that's forming up over on between Worthington and Thomas Farm as well. So now you've got a pretty good assault going on up here between Confederate and Union forces. And there's that nice image that we had done of the bridge burning. All right, so while that is happening, and that's happening between 7 and 8 in the morning, and then it will go throughout the day, the bridge is burned around noon. Around 10:30 in the morning, John McCausland is going to be sent with about 1,200 cavalry to find a ford in the river to get around the Union, who is based there on the south side of the river. This is a nice flag we have that was captured just after the battle, actually by 8th Illinois Cavalry, and it was then given to Lew Wallace. So we actually have this in the museum, Confederate flag that was captured here during the battle. So those cavalry are going to be here, and they're going to cross this ford. The action that we had talked about is going on up here at the junction area. Now we're down here at the Worthington Farm. Here's sort of that cluster of houses. Over here is Thomas Farm. And you see you've got about 1 company of 8th Illinois that are here. The Confederates are going to come down. They're going to encounter the 8th Illinois. And then they're going to come up here and hit this fence row. These Union soldiers are going to be sort of crouched down behind a fence row, and the Confederates are basically going to walk right into them, not knowing that they're there. John Worthington was watching from his house and later asked Breckinridge, who set up his headquarters over here, why they walked as if on parade into this line. Well, obviously from the second story of his house, he could actually see these guys, whereas the Confederates couldn't. And so they're going to be pushed back towards the Worthington house. They'll be there for a few hours. Now they kind of know a little bit better what they've gotten themselves into, and they're going to approach the line a little differently. This time they're going to go up sort of over Brooks Hill and try to outflank the Union. And then the Union is going to get reinforcements, because by this time the bridge has been burned, and the Union who were over here are now reinforcing the line, and they're going to be able to push those Confederates There's that reinforcement of the Union line, and they're going to push the Confederates back again. So around this, it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and General Gordon had been sitting on reserve on the Buckystown Pike. And he's going to have 3 brigades and be ordered to ford that river the same place that the cavalry did, and then make an assault on the Union line as well. And so you've got 3 brigades here led by Clement Evans, Zebulon York, and William Terry. And this is what the field looked like before 270 went in, probably very similar to what it would have looked like during the Civil War. Kind of see in the background here, this is Worthington. This is Brooks Hill, which is actually what we'll see Terry come over Brooks Hill with his troops. And so here is where we are sort of at the start of this battle. We've got Union troops that are in line here on the Thomas farm, sort of protecting that area. Over here, the bridge has been burned. There's still some fighting going on over there. Eventually what's going to happen is those men who were on the other side of the bridge, that company of Vermonters and the 100 day men, they're actually going to be able to retreat across the railroad under heavy fighting, but they're going to retreat across that railroad bridge, and most of them won't be captured. The gentleman or the officer who leads them across that bridge and helps them with the fighting over there, he's going to receive a Medal of Honor for his actions there, and that's going to be, what is his name? It's going to escape me all of a sudden. We'll talk about him in a little bit. George Davis is his name, and we actually have a good bit of his artifacts in our museum, including wedding ring that he gave to his wife at the beginning of the Civil War. All right, so here are the Confederates. You've got Evans, York, and Terry. Evans is going to come first, go over Brooks Hill, make the first assault on the Union line. York is going to come up the middle, and then they're going to push the Union back, be moving forward, and then Terry is going to sweep up from the river and hit the right flank of the Union and continue to push them back. This is actually going to be the heaviest fighting of the battle. It's going to be about over a 2-hour period in the field here at Thomas, and that's going to be very hotly contested. One thing that's really important in this battle is that those reinforcements that came from Virginia at the last minute for the Union, the Confederates did not expect them. And for some reason, there's a breakdown in communication throughout this battle that when McCausland's men attack, they are not expecting soldiers who have actually been in battle before. They're expecting these 100 day men. And the same thing happens once you get to Gordon's attack. Gordon and most of the generals knew what they were facing, but that did not trickle down into the men who were actually going into battle. And so they continue to say in some of their letters as they're going into battle that they had never seen Green soldiers fight so well. So they still were not approaching this as if they were going to be fighting veteran troops. So now we see the Union retreat, the Confederates take the field. It is a Confederate victory. They strategically take the field, but Wallace knew when he called for that retreat, his men were in retreat anyhow. They had been fighting continuously the whole day, and there were about 12, let's see, I think the official number is 1,294 dead, wounded, and missing. The Confederates will have 900 dead, wounded, and missing. But at this point, they're not going to be able to continue that day. So that saves a lot of time. And the point was to make it a delaying action, to delay them here at the junction area as long as they possibly could, to give time for Grant to get another division of troops into the forts in Washington so that when Early gets there, he will not be able to get into the city. So that's really the point of this battle. They were not going to win this battle. Wallace knew it. He just needed to keep them here as long as he could so that they could not walk into Washington, D.C., which is what they would have been able to do had this battle not occurred. Once Early got to Fort Stevens, he knew that he knew that the Union reinforcements were back, and he also knew that he had a huge supply train of goods and money. He had ransom towns as he came through. He got a great deal of money from that. They raided stores, had animals. They had lots of supplies that they needed to safely get back across the river. So he had to get out. He had to get out of Dodge, and so he starts moving his army back across the river. Fast forward about a month, and you have a change of command that's actually going to happen here at the battlefield, at the Thomas House. And this is when Sheridan is going to take over for Hunter, and is basically told by Grant to, that this is now the all-out war. Make sure Crow can't find food in the valley, and so this is where that sort of campaign is going to start, and that takes place at the Thomas House. Not long after it had suffered a great deal of damage from the battle, which we're actually trying to figure out is how they hosted this. Because Grant presumably spent the night there, and Hunter didn't meet him there, but Sheridan did, and that they held this council of war in a house that had been pockmarked with artillery and infantry firings, and that the dining room had been completely destroyed by an exploded ordnance during the battle. There was a lot of damage to the house. So we're still trying to figure out how they hosted this soiree a month later. So here are some of the monuments that are on the battlefield. Sorry if you're coming here, the cows are in a different spot now. They're not behind the monument. But if you go behind the Thomas House or back at Worthington, you will see some cows. Again, this is the 14th New Jersey Monument. Or I'm sorry, this is the 14th New Jersey Monument. And these are, let's see, Daughters of the Confederacy did a monument during the centennial. And then Maryland put up a marker that is for both Union and Confederate soldiers who were in Maryland units that fought at the battle. And this is that state marker. It talks about Special Orders 191. And then this is the Vermont Monument. These two markers and the 14th New Jersey are both located along 355, which was the Georgetown Pike at the time. And these are located on Araby Church Road. This is on the corner of Araby Church and Baker Valley, and this is actually just across the street, but Araby Church Road. So just wanted to show you a little bit of the battlefield. If you haven't been here before, this is our visitor center that's along 355. And this is the Thomas Farm, this is our administrative headquarters. We do hold events here occasionally, at least pre-COVID we did. We try to do a historic house series of some sort. Obviously through COVID, that's been a little different each year, where we highlight some of the historic houses. And then, oops, didn't want to do that. This is what we refer to as the tenant house. This is one of the original houses as well. The Thomas House was initially built in the 1780s, but it was actually just this section right here. And this building is built at the same time, and it served many different purposes through the years. Stable, workshop. We believe that probably they did have enslaved people there, and it's quite likely that they would have lived in this structure as well. And then eventually there were tenants on the farm that lived there. And then the last owners converted it into a pool house. There was a pool next door. And now we are using it as an interpretive center that's going to open up here shortly in the spring. We have some exhibits that are inside that people will be able to see, that will tell them about sort of the growth of the area and around the Monocacy Junction through Native American up into the 20th century, and it kind of follows sort of the economics of the area, what their economy was with the milling and the farming, And then it talks about La Hermitage, the best farm when it was a French farm, talks about that time period as well. This is the Worthington farm, and the house that is there, it's the only historic structure that is left on the farm. And then this is the Gambrel Mill. And that was a working mill at the time of the battle. And actually, Mr. Gambrel and Samuel Thomas, the son from the Thomas family who lived in this house, and two of his friends actually hid in this mill during the battle. They had been impressed into the Union Army because apparently they lingered too long for their 4th of July holiday at the Thomas house. And the Union thought that they were lingering to join the Confederate Army. And so they pressed them into the Union Army. They were able to escape the Union lines and hide in the mill with Mr. Gambrel during the day. This is the best farm. So these structures all date, well, except for the corn crib, these all date to the 1790s. This is a very unique barn. The only one like it in the continental United States because of the hip roof. And it is basically an English. If you've been to Europe or you've seen pictures of their farms, that's what they look like. All right, so along with our historic houses and monuments, we have events throughout the year here, and we did start having events last year. We're going to be having some events again this year. You can find that information on our website. This just shows you, usually battle anniversary, we have infantry and artillery demonstrations, and then we might have one or two other programs during the summer that also do artillery or infantry. I think this year we're actually going to do artillery and infantry on two of the other farms, Thomas Farm and Best, maybe. I think we're going to kind of highlight the farms and then do some living history there as well. And then we also have the great outdoors to enjoy here at the battlefield. We have hiking trails at every farm with the wildlife that goes along with it. This is sort of the little sandbar that's down off of the Gambrel Mill Trail. You can get down to the river, kind of a view of the what was the covered wooden bridge during the battle, now the bridge that goes over 355. This is also at the Gambrel Mill. This is part of the trail that we have, and part of that trail is handicap accessible. The half-mile trail and about a quarter of it, which goes down towards the river, is handicap accessible. This is a nice trail we have down at the Worthington farm, and if you're there when the bluebells are blooming, you will see a whole fields of these. It's gorgeous. There's that phone again. So that's the end of the presentation. I wanted to give you a little taste of different items that, or different things that we have here at the battlefield that you can see if you come visit, including the monuments, the historic buildings, the trails. And if you get on our website, there's actually a 360 degree tour of the interior of the historic Worthington house, which is really cool. I would invite you to take a look at that. On the website, you can also download a brochure that has the trail guide on, or has trails on that map, as well as telling you how to get around the battlefield. There's a link to our foundation, which has the podcast that is like a 45-minute narration that will take you through the battle. And then let's see, I would tell you to check the website and Facebook for updates on the park and different events that we're having. The park is open every day. The visitor center and museum is open Thursday through Monday, 9 to 5. So we're closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So there's a lot of information.
Tracy, thank you so much. Actually, you hit on some of the questions we had too. And I'm sorry if we kept you from any phone calls. But we are going to bring on our interns real quick, Anjali and Ben, and they've got a couple more questions for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
Great.
Hi there. Great presentation. So let's start with this one. How does the site work to tell all the different histories that have occurred at the location?
That is a great question. And I would say at this point, it doesn't. but we're trying to get better about that. One of the things we're talking about is how to better do that. What's the best way to do it? When you go to the Best Farm, for example, there are one or two waysides that tell you about the farm during the period when the Vicendiers were there and there was that enslaved village. The rest of it is just about the Best Farm. At Worthington, it's just talking about Worthington. So one of the things that we did was we wanted to do these series of exhibits at that tenant house on the Thomas farm, because that will explore a lot of different layers of history and with voices of all the people that lived here throughout that history. Another thing that we want to do in the future is there is a website, or I'm sorry, there's an app that the National Park Service put out, and each park has sort of its own little entity on that. And so that's something that we can continue to add to, that when you're at different places on the field, you can have your app there and it will tell you different things that happened in that area. We've talked about maybe putting some sort of information in the windows of the houses that tell you a little bit more about that, using our website and events. So we just finished our long-range interpretive plan, and it kind of goes through all of our interpretive themes, and that is definitely something we are highlighting in the future. We've been doing, but we know that we want to do more of. So that is, and particularly, we're working on the design of a new museum, and that's definitely going to have lots of different voices in it: free and enslaved African Americans who were here, USCT. Firsthand accounts from soldiers and civilians that were here during the battle. So it's something we're very aware of. We have some of it implemented, and we continue to work on that.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and your presentation today. And we always end our live sessions with asking you, our great guide, how you got into this field, and if you have any advice for the students watching on this field, on what you do, etc.
Wow, how did I get into the field? Literally an accident, but I did an internship here in college. And then I landed back here some years later as a seasonal. And then I got into one of the student programs where I went to graduate school. And then there was a position when I got out of graduate school. But they periodically change the types of student positions that they have. Now they have something called pathways. And if you're a seasonal, you can earn land management hours, and once you have so many land management hours, you can apply for positions as if you already have permanent status. So there's a lot of different programs that the Park Service has, youth programs. My background was actually in European history, but I really liked the site, and I really enjoyed the Park Service. And so I decided that I wanted to continue here, and got my master's degree in Civil War and African American Studies. And so that's sort of how I landed here. I will tell you, it is not easy to get into the Park Service. There are less jobs, it seems, all the time. And what we usually do is encourage people, when you're in high school, you can start doing Youth Conservation Corps. You can volunteer at your national parks. When you're in college, look for the student programs that are available. There's something, SCA, Student Conservation Association. There's different internships at different parks. Some are more established and formal. And then there's seasonal positions, there's pathway positions. So you really have to get a lot of experience and kind of get to know people within the Park Service. So the more experience in volunteering and things like that you have on your resume, the better, because it is highly competitive. I was lucky to get in at a good time.
That was great. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. We truly appreciate the time. And this was a remarkable presentation. So we really appreciate what you do and being with us today.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on and telling folks a little bit about the park. Appreciate that.
Looking forward to come see you again in person. And thank you everyone at home watching. We'll be back here next week at noon. And I hope to see you there. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.